Aloha, my name is Anna Covert, and I'm coming to you from my battleship here on the beautiful island of Oahu. This week on the Covert Code, the topic is storytelling that converts, and my special guest is Jim Gibson, former magician, TEDx speaker, Forbes writer, and VP of brand management at Thrive Digital Marketing Agency. A With over 1,000 active clients, there's no surprise that they have been awarded the Inc. 5000 list of achievements 7 years in a row. Today, Jim's here to share how building an authentic brand and leading with persuasive storytelling can really be a separator from a competitive advantage in this ever evolving digital landscape. Thanks so much for being here, Jim.
Sure, Anna.
Gimme.
Happy to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Great. Well, to get us started, can you tell us a little bit about your professional journey? You're so interesting, done so many things. How did you get from professional magician to brand storytelling expert?
Wow, that is quite a twisty, turny path, but I will do my best to be succinct. I was digging through some boxes a few years ago, and I was like, I can't even believe I've saved this stuff. But there was a little membership card to Merlin's Mail Order Magic Club, and I flipped it over, and I guess somebody had used the typewriter and typed my name and looked at the date and started doing the math, and I was 4 years old. And I
Wow.
thought, wow, that is pretty early to get involved in something that has stuck with me for this long. And so then I got another magic kit when I was 6 years old. And when I was in middle school, my friends' parents would hire me to perform magic at the birthday parties of my friends. And I thought, okay, this is really cool. Something that I would be invited to. Now I'm getting paid to do it.
Wow.
There might be something in this. So then in high school, I met a gentleman who worked at an ad agency, and that's what they were called back then. I think there's still some vestiges of ad agencies. Now they're digital marketing agencies. And he had a client, a global client that we've all heard of, that needed a performer to help with promoting their products and doing some shows. And I said, sure. So while everybody else was working retail and, cutting grass, I was doing these shows. And that relationship lasted for another 16 years. And so being able to hang out at the ad agency and, seeing all the cool people and understanding and asking questions, um, and realizing that, it is about persuasion in a good way. It's about a little bit of performance. And then there is some conversion that needs to happen, or in magic, the sort of the climax of the magic trick where something needs to have an ending to it. I thought, wow, if that was a profession that mimicked magic, I think that would be it. And so I did go to college and studied creative advertising with a minor in graphic design. Um, and actually had a dual career at that point where I was working in agencies and then doing shows. I spoke to the owners and said, hey, I'm doing these shows. So I would show up at the agency at 6 a.m., work till noon. At that point, I had transitioned to working some theme parks, a large illusion show with about 22 cast members and 16 major illusions. And so then I would do 5 shows in the afternoon.
Wow.
And that went on for a while. And the more I did each, they fed on each other. And so I would always be asking questions to the owner and saying, hey, why are we doing this campaign? What's the purpose? What are they trying to do? And so I guess they got everything, and they said, why don't you go meet with a client? And I was like, okay. And so I guess just that inquisitive nature and trying to understand how things worked, I ended up being promoted to creative director, and then was working in an agency that was an Omnicom agency, which is
Yeah.
basically a holding company for agencies all over the world. And
Sure.
anyway, the branch manager of our office decided that she was kind of done and wanted to move on to other things. And so we're all sitting here staring at each other going, okay, what do we do? And I sort of threw my hat in the ring, my top hat in the ring, and spoke with the regional VP, and actually became the person who ran the office as well as the creative director. And it was kind of cool to put on your tie and go meet with the big client and figure out what their business problem was, and then come back and kick off your shoes and put your flip flops on and take your tie off and work with the team to create something that was not only meaningful but profitable.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, there were a number of stints at various agencies, and I've been with Thrive Agency for the last 5 years and have had 5 different titles. We're a growing business, and I think when you're inquisitive and ask a bunch of questions and put yourself out there, then things can happen. And so after a year, I moved from really expanding their strategy department to moving into operations and executive leadership. And the owner came to me back in October and said, "Hey, we've kind of been this little secret for the last 20 years. We really haven't promoted ourselves too much. I think we've got a lot of lessons that we can teach other people. um, I'd like for you to step out and sort of be the face of the company." And so that's what I've been doing. And I think there is some direct relationship between coming on a podcast and performing a magic show. And so I've been having a lot of fun with that. And I think we'll probably get into the topic of AI and
Mhm.
how that's a great opportunity for brands and also a scary place for people to be. And how do you tell story with ChatGPT? And so, yeah, I would say that's a quick flyby of where I've been, and we can explore whatever you'd like, Anna.
Great. Well, that was a great story. And I actually did see a post today that you wrote on LinkedIn just about that very topic of, that, hey, while us as agencies and creatives are, kind of, and I'm an author, of course. So right away when AI first came out, I was already apprehensive, like, oh, I don't know about this, because I enjoyed taking that time to sit down and write something. And but at the same time, it can, we know that the first 100 ideas you have are garbage, right? And you got to throw them away. Or the first 15 minutes you write anything, it's pretty much a fail, or not a fail, but it could be better, right? It's when you
Right,
start
right.
getting your juices flowing, and then it all starts to flow. And so are we taking the shortcut, was my fear, of not even letting ourselves get into this creative process and now being so trained to just want the immediate result? I think that the answer is yeah, people do want the immediate result. And we're all using it too at the agency now. I'm usually using it for editing things. Like I'll write something and then I'll just be like, pop it in. I'm dyslexic. So it's like really easy to just pop it and be like, hey, edit. And it cleans it up and no spelling errors. And I'm like, this is a winner. But I was really interested in the post you wrote about how, search engines can tell. And more importantly than that, I think that the consumer can tell. Tell me about what you're experiencing in the market.
Yeah, so I think it is sort of a dual-edged sword, and it can actually cause a brand to become invisible
Mm.
or allow a brand to stand on the mountaintop, sword in hand, going, "Yes, we are here and we are visible." And I don't know why I came up with that analogy, probably because I'm sitting across the screen from a accomplished writer and uh, the creative pictures started flowing. But what happens, and I think, there are other benefits to using artificial intelligence, but when we talk about it for content creation, when you're not well versed, you're expecting that AI interface, and we'll just talk about ChatGPT. I think that's probably the one that's most well known, but there's plenty of other ones out there, Gemini, Grok. Um, the less we give that interface, the worse the results are going to be that come back. And so, if I could take that from a magic perspective, it's a really bad mind reader because it's trying to predict what is next based on what you tell it, right? And so it has a great database of all of these things that it's pulling from. And people have become very good at recognizing what is basically saying nothing. And so we run into this a lot of times where we might be developing a website for a client and they say, "Oh, no, we've got it handled. We have a writer," air quotes. And when it comes back, it's obviously written by AI. And so we have to have a hard conversation to go, but it really doesn't say anything. AI is very friendly. AI is very generic. AI is very um, culturally and politically correct. It doesn't want to offend. It doesn't want to be divisive. And it's very hard to make it express conflict, bruises, scars that have happened across the history of your business and what lessons you may have learned. There's no way. Now, if you create the draft and you infuse some of that, you're exactly right. It's great at proofreading. It can clean it up. It's good for ideation. But you have to basically pull, tug, and wrestle it to the ground to get anything out that sounds like you and sounds like your brand. And so what we're seeing in Again, you mentioned in the intro, we have 1,000 active clients. What are they concerned about? They're concerned that their search volume is going to go down, that they are going to lose the ranking that they have. And we can talk about some technical aspects of that. What these LLMs are looking for are brand mentions. They're looking for contextual understanding about what your brand is about. And those who don't take the shortcut and those who are willing to step out and talk about who they are and what they stand for are going to leap ahead of the pack.
I agree. I think, and it's just like every different cycle of business. We've seen, at least because I specialize in digital advertising, and when I went to school, there wasn't digital advertising, right? Like
Right.
we had websites, but they were basically virtual brochures and just another touch point. It wasn't anything else than that. No engagement. There wasn't anything going on, right? And sure, there was shopping, but again, it was transactional and it wasn't anything more than that. And I thought that was a real benefit for me. I'm glad I didn't have social media in college, right? Because we were not responsible enough for that kind of power, you know. But me and my friends always. But I think out of that, what I've seen is like there's these cycles, right? And now we're back up on an SEO cycle, right? Because they kind of people spend a lot of money and then they're like, oh, I'd rather just do paid ads, and we it's hard to know because Google's in control, right? And they can change it on a fly, and they do. But now, as we're getting over 250,000 new websites every single day online worldwide, now I think we're back in another SEO swing where people are starting to realize, well, the engine actually needs to go back to localization techniques. How does it really know who is local when there's so much other things coming online? Right. And I'm a big advocate for fraud prevention, but it's a whole new world, right? And so what are you guys doing? I mean, I think what is the average number of pages that one of your websites has? Do you guys use different kind of templates? I mean, what's the similarity of all your clients? Is there some similarity?
I wouldn't say there's similarity because we do work across all industries and the requirements for some are different than others. I would say there is choices that these LLMs are making, and they're looking at the footprint of your not only your website, but what is happening off of the website. And so we can talk about that a little bit. You know, in a field where a business may have at most 25 pages, you got to have 25 pages, unless the 25 pages of that competitor are not so great and unrelated and not structurally set up the way that they need to be for these bots to, catalog and index what is on your site.
Sure.
We run into a lot of enterprise businesses who have invested a lot in content, but it's actually pulling down their ranking because of not only the way that that site is structured, but the content on that site is not relevant to where they want to be in the marketplace. And so we end up reconfiguring, doing a lot of 301 redirects, pulling content off of the website, making the structure of the website with internal linking appropriate so that it's easy for these bots to understand what's going on, making sure the content is relevant, that we're not keyword stuffing. And again, keyword approach and search engine results page or SERPs are a little bit different now. We're moving into the zero click world, which
Yes.
to your point needs to be very hyper local focused. Whether you're a global agency or excuse me, a global brand or not, you still have presence in local markets. So how are you going to strategize to show up in the markets that you serve when your corporate office may be in one location? So we're seeing that. I mean, we deal with websites that have thousands and thousands of pages, and we have to really be strategic about um, what goes on behind the scenes. The other thing that we're seeing is you mentioned the world of SEO has come back. I would say also the world of PR has come back.
Hmm.
It used to be that you would send a press release to the local newspaper or television station, and you would hope that you would be covered on the news. The backlink profile has changed. It used to be that it wasn't so much about what the website was about as long as it had an adequate DA rating, domain ranking or domain authority that would transfer that authority to your website. Now it's more contextual about why is that link on that site? Does it make sense for that business? And so it's a much more a broad approach on site and off site that we're seeing show up in these LLMs. And I think it's an exciting time. I think it's scary for a lot of people, but I think um, we're all about not sugarcoating it. And we're also not about trying to hide the information. We'd rather our clients to to be educated, to know what's going on, to be able to make business decisions, whether they use us or not, for all of their work. So, yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. And we've, it's so interesting that you're 100% right. And then why I decided to write my book that Forbes published last year was because of this huge misinformation, right? That I had to have mom and pops that I work with here in Hawaii that I love, and then big, Fortune 500 companies like SunPower. And the story's the same. By the time they reach me or the agency, they've already been through three or more, already spending hundreds of thousands without the promised result. And a lot of that, I mean, I'm sure you're not going to be surprised, but I'm always surprised when I like log into someone's analytics and see that the search console is not connected. We go to
Mhm.
search console, there's huge numbers of errors, right? So we've actually been doing a big overhaul for our clients just with some of the new even knowledge about H1. We used to use it in design as something that was pretty, like an H1 title, right? Now, if you have more than one H1 on the page, like that's a Google problem, right? So I think things like that and just telling the customer that you're like, educating them that it's like when you have a logo that you loved when it was redeveloped it, and there's nothing wrong with your logo, but maybe it doesn't match the consumer of today or it doesn't appear well on a mobile device. Same kind of thing. Like we built the site with the best intentions at the time. Now things have changed. The link structure, the schemas, all of these things are impacting the way that search is changing, and it's time to evolve and not like point fingers.
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned a lot of technical things. Page load speed is important, how it shows up on mobile, how weighty is the site. Um, if your site is more than 2 to 3 years from a serious revamp, it's time to sort of get a professional in there to look under the hood and see what's going on because it does change so fast.
I think people almost I just thought of it now. I think there just should almost be like a budget. When you have like a home improvement budget, there should
Mhm,
be even really thinking in advance, like, like a we like to do refresh branding exercises, and we didn't used to.
mhm.
We would do a branding exercise when someone started with us, even if it was abbreviated, just we could all get on the same page, literally of who we are and what our verticals are and what's success going to look like and all that. But now we started to do it every year, kind of do like a check-in, like just to review, like, are we still on the same trajectory as we were?
Mhm.
And what we found is that things are changing so much faster than they were before, right? And I think that that's a really good point. There should be like we build your website today, there's going to be hosting, but you need to have a budget prepared now or on your thought process or for a couple years from now when we're going to need to go back in and do a whole audit.
Yeah, because it's your home base. It's pretty much the only property on the internet that you have total control over. If you show up on other platforms, they could change overnight. We've seen it happen time and time again. So invest in the area that is the hub of all activities related to getting to know your brand and where conversion happens.
Yeah, I call it the mothership. So let's talk for a second. So you mentioned PR and we also used to and we still do, but I found that it hasn't been as successful. We did EIN distribution for news articles. And we used to see them show up in third parties like SpyFu and others. And now with the no follow rules from Google and whatnot, we're starting to see that we still do it and there's still a value, but not as great. Are you and your agency doing some of these distribution services still, or now is it kind of you're going direct to you're finding different content authorities and you're contacting them individually to do stories and things like that?
Oh, you're asking me to peel back the curtain, Anna. Okay. Um, I would say, as you said, there are trends that happen, and there are people that have relationships with websites that can facilitate your ability to get on those websites. As I mentioned earlier, that's becoming less and less important. And a little secret for the listeners out there, go sign up for Haro, Haro, Help a Reporter Out. And it is a platform where folks who are writing articles need experts. And they send out an email every day. It's not a website you can go to. And you scroll through these requests, and we're having huge success for our clients, um, understanding how to secure a mention in traditional, mostly online publications, that's where the value is, which are solid, which are the actual publication, which have do follow links, which um, are awesome venues to not only have that backlink, but to communicate your experience, expertise, develop authority, trustworthiness. So I just mentioned an acronym EEAT, which is Google's gold standard for the type of content that they're going to support in these searches. And so I would say that's one secret sneaky tip that folks can do.
Wonderful.
And, if you're a local business, you should join the Chamber of Commerce. You should introduce yourself to local media. You should find out what publications are available in your area. If there's a local news station and if you're an HVAC or a plumbing company and there's a flood or there's a heat wave or a cold wave, make yourself available to be the expert who contributes to the conversation. Uh, you'd be surprised because these places are in desperate need of experts. They
Absolutely.
want to seem credible to their audience. And so we encourage our folks. We don't facilitate that, but that's one of the things that we really work with folks on how to do that. And yeah, I would say those are a couple of sneaky tips.
Well, that's great tips. Thanks so much for sharing that. So to switch a little bit, we talked about SEO and the health of the site. What about the future of digital advertising? What are you seeing that's happening out there in your markets? Are you using bot protection, programmatic? Tell me what's going on from your perspective.
Yeah, I would say that world is probably even more than SEO and you're probably more of an expert than I am at this point. I've moved out of the management of our team that does that work. So, um, but what we're seeing at the top level is there is a little bit of a threat because of these LLM uh, results that are coming up. And you could see, there was some chatter online about Meta and Zuckerberg hiring some AI professionals and the team wanted to hire at one amount and he doubled that amount for quite a bit of money because they want to protect their asset of online space and to be able to show up. We're seeing now that Instagram um, is showing up in searches, photos and content. Um, what's probably going to happen is it's going to end up being sort of a black box and you are going to be contained within an environment with those ads. They're not going to go away. That's a huge revenue generator. I'm not a futurist, so I can't predict, but I'm interested to hear your opinion on the situation.
It's very scary out there. One of the tools that I'm a big believer in and I always talk my listeners already know about it, but it's called Clixies. And they're a Tel Aviv company and they're just wonderful. I mean, I was maybe 3 or 4 years ago when I started to notice that across all my digital ad accounts, or Google Ads accounts and Facebook, and they were very different industries all around the country. Same thing, around 30% was down. And I'm like, something's happening. Like, what could it be? And then lo and behold, I get served an ad from Clixy. It's like, oh, 27% of all traffic online is fake. And I was like, So I installed it. That seems oddly aligning with my numbers over here. And so I installed it and it was incredible. Like it immediately returned to normal levels. Like I can see, I'm a big believer in like you have to see it to believe it.
Yep.
And I saw the blocking of those bots and it's like, it's incredible how, Google and Facebook will have an immediate block and you can see hundreds, thousands of blocks a day, right? And it's been getting worse. Over the last 3 or 4 months, I've seen it double from that. And programmatic, it is really bad right now. I mean, I've seen this in the last month. I've been doing some consulting with TV people who are buying from the TV station, or
Mhm.
huge, even a large company that I won't mention their name, but they're global, and they were saying that they were the the top of fraud prevention, and they're the only programmatic, or you weren't going to pay for any fraud. I'm like, okay, this sounds aligned, right, with what I'm after, and I can't afford human as a for instance from my agency, and like little guys over here in Hawaii, and turns out the data didn't match. They didn't know what they were talking about. And it's
Mm.
just like that's the kind of, I think, situation that we're finding ourselves in today is that people are afraid because there isn't the knowledge, right? And they trust these partners and they trust what they're hearing and they like the
Right.
people they're working with, and those people they like what they've been sold the story or drank the Kool-Aid. And so then there's all this misknown and what is actually happening. And so my fear is for the industry at large, that if we,
Oh yeah.
just like when the Better Business Bureau was established, it's that, if we don't self-regulate, we will be overregulated. And that's really, I've never seen a scarier time in online ads. I mean, when a tenth of the ads that you spend money on are actually reportable in G4,
Mm.
we have a serious problem,
Yeah.
people can't afford it. And so I'm thinking the next 6 months here, big things are going to change.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah, but I think the one thing we can agree on is no matter what, whatever I consult with anyone and they come to me and I say, listen, I don't care what kind of how much traffic you're getting. Maybe you're not getting all the traffic we think we're getting, but you are getting some traffic.
Right.
That's the conversion rate. Like the answer is never to spend more, right? Let's fix the story on the site. Let's fix what are we really selling? What are the keywords we really want to be? What is that customer journey?
Mhm.
And then, let's get more traffic to that page. But, I think it's a common misconception that if it doesn't work, you just have to throw more money at it.
Oh yeah.
That's not the way that we've seen it be successful.
Well, you're right. The three-legged stool is traffic to the site, average order value or average service value, and conversion rate. And you can adjust your what product or service you're promoting on that landing page to up your average order value. And then if your conversion rate is repelling, why is it repelling? And if you can up your conversion rate and bump up your average order value a little bit with the same amount of traffic, then it's amazing how that can increase your top line.
Absolutely. And I love talking to people like about, the magnetic middle. I don't know if you've read the book, yes, but it's a 50 proven ways to use psychology and behavioral science. It's a really great book. But in there they talk about how, you can use pricing to lift up the whole order, right?
Oh yeah.
By putting what you really want to your favorite product right in the middle there so that people gravitate magnetically toward it. And, you know, those are some of the little tiny cues that we like to do. So tell me, you're a TEDx speaker. That is amazing. What were you speaking about?
Yeah, so maybe we'll include the link. It was actually related to a trip that my wife and I had to Rwanda.
Oh wow.
So we were sponsoring a young man, and it was just a little amount of money that helped pay for schooling and a uniform. And, they had a genocide over there where 1 million people were killed in 100 days and left a lot of families in very tough situations. And so um, this young man had lost his father and there were multiple kids. And so, me thinking I'm a magician, I'm going to go over there and, do these magic shows. And magic is a little bit different in Africa than it is in the US. So there was a lot of apprehension about me saying I wanted to do a magic show, right? And um, so I just said, okay, well, this isn't about me. We're just going to get to know this young man and the environment that he's struggling with. And so we showed up at the school, and there was an interpreter, and it was awesome because we had been writing letters back and forth. um, and we had a great day. We met his family. The family had no furniture. Before we showed up at the house, he had gone around the neighborhood and borrowed some chairs and things so that we could sit down.
Wow.
Dirt floor. So it's very humbling to see that. And we left and we were like, wow, like, yes, we're going to continue to send this little bit of money over there to help. And so we got back home and my wife and I were talking about the trip and we were comparing notes and we were like, you know what? Every time we were talking to Emmanuel, he always wanted the interpreter on his left side. Why is that?
Hmm.
And he wasn't doing very well in school. And so we just sort of inquired to the organization that handles all these sponsorships. And they said, well, I don't know, we'll take a look. Well, we got a message back a few weeks later that Emmanuel had had an ear infection for 8 years. And like, what? And so he had never asked for help. He knew that his family couldn't afford anything. Like the little bit of money that we were sending didn't cover like exploratory stuff. And so, like, he was, I guess, couldn't hear very well. He wasn't
Wow.
doing very well in school. He obviously was in pain.
Oh,
And so they said, would you want to pay for the operation? And, of course, with our Western brains, we're like, oh, what does that mean? $20,000, $30,000? Like, what? I don't even know what that means. So we said, well, just figure out what's going on and let us know. And so obviously we're dealing with a different type of culture and things don't move very fast. And so it was weeks and weeks that went by and we were sort of wondering what was going on. And I had a magic show in Washington, D.C., and I would typically call my wife and say, hey, I'm headed home. And so I did. And she said, well, the organization called and they told us what the price of the operation would be. They diagnosed what was going on. And so I'm driving down Interstate 95 and I'm holding my breath and I'm like, oh, what's it going to be? This is crazy. And so she told me the number. And it was literally almost the exact amount that I had just made doing something that I love, had been doing my entire life, and I would have done for free.
wow.
And so we said, of course, we will pay for this operation. And so there was a group that went over the next year and they said that Emmanuel's personality had completely changed. He was doing much better in school. He was outgoing. And so I was like, wow. I said, and part of the TEDx talk was, we all have some sort of abracadabra that we're good at, and you have no idea how that can affect somebody else in another part of the world that you may never even cross paths with. And so, what if every company in the world could activate the abracadabra of their employees and use that to not only change their organization, to change the relationship with their customers, to impact their communities? Like, wow. And so it was really a challenge to think about what that is, whether it has anything to do with your business skills or not. It could be you play the guitar, you fix bicycles, you bake the best cake. Be proud of that and don't be afraid to put it out there. And so that's basically what it was about.
Well, that is beautiful. I got like chills just when you told me that story. It is really incredible that when you start to think about just the you can even with with just anything, you can change someone else's life and their perspective. And I just started the last 6 or 7 months into meditating, and it's been transformative for me. Like I never, I guess when I was a child, one of my friends from school, she reminded me, she's like, "Oh, Anna, I used to do karate when I was young." She's like,
Yeah.
"You used to meditate?" And I'm like, "Really?" I didn't even remember, you know. But and then I was like, "Oh, I guess so," when I was back in when I was 5 or whatever.
Right.
But, it's just that sharing of knowledge even, and maybe it's money, maybe it's your time, maybe whatever it is, whatever that value proposition is, it is transformative.
Yep. Yeah. And so there's a little acronym that maybe folks can remember, but my abracadabra grows improbable connections. And so it spells the word magic. It's,
Oh,
yeah,
you
imagine that. And so I would just challenge everybody to figure out what that is and don't be afraid to share it and give it to somebody else.
wow. So are you still, are you guys still going you're still writing to him?
He actually graduated out of the program and went into a technical profession, and we have not heard from him in a while. But you've just sparked my interest that I'll need to get in touch with the organization and get an update on where he is. So,
Yeah. Yeah, wow. That's cool. So, what I guess, tell me, like, what do you think are some of your recommendations for people on how they can safely navigate AI, you know, while still, I guess, making sure that they are on brand with their true self? I mean, is there a mix in the middle? Do they need a professional? Like what steps would you recommend for someone they could do today to start telling the most compelling story?
Yeah, I would say, as we mentioned before, it's a great idea generator, but you've got to come to it with some ideas. And to be able to think about AI as an assistant, a ghostwriter that helps you think through your ideas. Um, I actually created a custom GPT that I call my mastermind group. And so I trained it and provided some information related to some people that I admire. And um, I can put in some thoughts and it will pull from those resources and say, well, here's what Sherlock Holmes would do in this situation, or, whatever the case may be. And so there's a lot of creative ways. You can have AI embody a tone of voice. So if there's a writer that you like, you can say, how would this person um, communicate this message? And so again, it gives you a good idea. I would say be careful. AI can hallucinate and tell you things that aren't true. And so make sure you know your facts and challenge AI and say, I don't think that's right. Are you sure that's right? Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. Um, and so the more you know about it, the more you work with it, you can sort of understand its nuances. And the other thing you can do is you can tell it to give me 10 versions and then pick the version that you think is the best. And then sort of, as I mentioned before, pull and tug and wrestle it to the point, but don't ever lose the backstory. Um, you know, if we're talking about organizations, there's 4 stories that we recommend. One is the founder story. Don't lead with that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the founder story talks about why is this business? How did it start? What is the background behind it? The next is the purpose story. That why are you doing? If it's not about the money, why are you doing what you're doing? The next one is the transformation story. Um, what is the state where a customer comes to you, and what is the state that they leave after they have an interaction with you? And then the next one is the customer story, which is from their perspective. If you talk about the structure of messaging, one of the things that we see a lot is people always wanting to talk about themselves. And so, um, don't lead with, hey, we've been in business for 20 years. Lead with a story about your ideal customer. And then the other thing that I would say is if there is information that is out there, and so we talked about websites earlier and they needing a refresh, have it go look at your About Us page and make some recommendations on how it could be better, more engaging, different. Is the story being told in a way that brings people in, gives them an emotional connection? So I would say those are a couple of tips.
Nice. It's a great tips. And what I guess is there any other trends in digital marketing that you're most excited about?
Well, I'm kind of a nerd. I made a avatar of myself that I was thinking, oh, well, I'll just make this avatar and it can do all my videos for me. It's close. It's not quite there. I actually cloned my voice and my wife said, yeah, it doesn't sound like you. Um, but I have seen some things online that are pretty impressive. I know there's been some movies that have been created with just AI. I would say image creation has gotten way better than it used to be even 6 months ago.
Yeah.
I would say the thinking, I mean, ChatGPT 5 was just released and its ability to reason and figure things out have increased. And then I would say the one thing that I'm excited about and a little scared about is this whole agentic world and these agents that can do tasks for you. And if you're looking for a theater uh, ticket, it'll go out and search what's going on in the city. It'll buy the ticket. And I'm like, I'm not sure I'm ready to turn over all that to an agent at this point. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it changes so fast, it's hard to keep up with.
I also thought about, some of the video creating like an Anna, Anna agent. I have one that, some other authors in the Forbes network were trying out Expert Loop. And it was kind of cool because you could like load all your book. I put my book, all my
Oh, nice.
articles, my podcast in there, and then I could use it for like if someone else wrote a piece and I wanted to comment on that piece, it would
Mm.
know what and then I was like, oh, this is exactly what I would say, because it's so that was kind of cool. But the idea of then, creating, an avatar, of me, and then I really had this identity crisis, about it, like, well, I did because I thought to myself, "Well, here I am, like, a public figure, and what are people like, how would they know if it was the real me?" Like, you would
Right.
always need, like, blue hair or something that would so people would know that this is AI Anna, not the real Anna, you know?
Right.
So I was a little frightened, but, with, just yeah, tell me keep me posted. What program are you using to create your virtual
Some folks recommended HeyGen to me,
agent?
Heygen, and I was impressed. They've made great strides in the last 6 months because I tried and got frustrated, and then I tried it again, and it got better. So, yeah, give it another 6 months, see what
And this
happens.
is the real you, right?
I'm not gonna tell.
Awesome. Well, how can people get a hold of you?
I'm on LinkedIn every day, stirring the pot, teaching some sort of principle, sharing some information. So, love for people to connect with me there. And yeah, and then the website is thriveagency.com. A lot of good resources there. I write an article on the blog every month, followed by a 20-minute video teaching some principle, and then a bunch of other stuff. And then, of course, if anybody needs any help, I'm happy to point them in the right direction.
Wow, thanks so much for being here, Jimmy. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
And to all my followers, please join me next week as I interview another industry expert and topics to help you succeed on and offline. Please make sure to push the like button. We're dangerously close to our 30,000 YouTube subscribers, thanks to you and your support. And I'll see you next week in the Pixels. Aloha. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Covert Code podcast. To stay up to date with all our future episodes, follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means everything to us. Please take a moment to leave a review and share our content with your friends and colleagues on social media. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more digital innovators like yourself. See you in the pixels. Aloha.